All right, good morning everybody. We are here working on the Jeep and finishing up some wiring that we started last weekend and unfortunately did not film, but I'll kind of give you a quick overview of what we did. But essentially, I have these two lights at the top of the Jeep that came with my bed rack, and they are a red and white LED light. And that's pretty much the only functionality they have. So they on and off between red and white. We're hooking them up to our turn signals and brake lights, as well as the reverse light. And so I'll kind of walk you through the wiring harness options that we picked up, how we're wiring it, and then what we're doing to make this work. All right, so what we've got is pretty much a wiring harness kit, a 4-pin connector, a 7-pin to 4-pin, and a reverse light lead, which I'll show you that. That's from Oracle. It's pretty cool. And then we just have a Deutsch connector wiring harness that we created. My brother created half of it. I'm going to finish out the second half. That'll basically run from the lights all the way down to the 4-pin and 7-pin. And that's how we're tapping into the reverse and brake lights / turn signals. So real quick, these are the electrical things that I've bought that I'm going to be using to create this harness. By no means the only way to do this, but it is kind of the cleanest way as we're making our own harness to make this happen. What we have here is the most important and probably the most clutch thing to make this harness work. You can get these on Amazon, but I specifically like Oracle's because it adds in the reverse light hookup. So the reason I picked the Oracle lighting one is specifically we have the 7-pin here and it tees off into a 4-pin. You can pretty much get one of those on Amazon, and that's what I had originally. But what I liked about Oracle specifically is these two wires here. These are tapped into the reverse light. So with that dual red and white, we're going to take that white light power and run them to these so that when we throw the Jeep in reverse, these will power then our white lights and we'll get those reverse backup lights, in addition to having the turn signals and brake that the 4-pin will give us. And so that way we don't have to cut into any of our Jeep harness. We can directly wire into this. The only thing we're cutting into is this harness, which we could replace if we needed to, and we're not messing with anything from Mopar when we bought it. And so of course you have to have something to connect to the 4-pin to make it easy. And so that's where this guy, the 4-pin, which you can buy this from Amazon. I think they're very, very cheap. It is basically a 4-pin connector with 4 leads on the end, and they are color coded to match a 4-pin connector that comes off of there, so it makes the wiring colors and the diagrams pretty easy with the wires that you're running from your lights. So you'll need a 4-pin, and then you'll need some sort of 7-pin to 4-pin converter with the backup light / reverse light leads built in, which is why, again, I like Oracle. And then the last thing that we've got to make things really nice and easy and clean looking is a Deutsch connector set, where you can build your own wiring harness based off of the Deutsch connector. So let's show you real quick what's on the Jeep and then why we're going to be using this Deutsch connector to run the harness underneath. All right, so like I said before, these are the lights themselves. I had them in and they worked, but the wiring itself was not clean. So what we did is, it's hard to see, but we ran new wiring here from Deutsch connectors in the back of the 4-pin that's in these lights. And we just ran this wiring in a harness all the way through. And then instead of it running down here like we had before, that looked real ugly and you could see, you can't even really see it, which is good, but I'll get close-ups of it and you'll see it up front. But instead, we ran the wiring up underneath the rack here. You can see it run across here, and then it runs basically along the top of the rack here. So when you're looking from down below, you can't really see it. Up top, you can see it. It looks pretty clean compared to what it was before. And then instead of running straight down here, we ran it this way, and it runs down essentially the passenger, what would be your B pillar if this was a full SUV. But basically, it's the front of the rack. And then you can see it comes down right here. Ran it down this pillar. And from this perspective, can't see it. From this perspective, can't see it. Of course, you can see it from the side there, but it's very well hidden. It's black, it looks good, and then it runs down to here. This honestly is the cleanest part and was a suggestion my brother had. But if we ever wanted to take the bed rack off, you'd have to cut the harness. So why not run a 4-pin Deutsch connector to that? And so what we've done, what he did, is run this 4-pin Deutsch connector here, and we're just going to add on to this Deutsch connector and run the wiring harness underneath the chassis, following the wiring harness back to that 7-pin and 4-pin that typically sits here at the rear bumper. So that way, if we ever want to take off this rack, we don't have to cut the wiring harness like I had before. We can just unplug that Deutsch connector that sits right there behind the passenger side rear door, and you could take the rack off the top, and the wiring harness down below is run. We don't have to touch that at all. If we want to put the rack back on, all you do is put the rack on, connect the Deutsch connector, and lights work. So that was kind of the intent, and super clean way of making our own harness. And so what we're going to do today is run that wiring harness from the Deutsch connector down to the 4-pin and 7-pin. And we're going to have to create that harness, which I'll show you here in a second. All right, so one more thing that I added to this that we didn't necessarily buy, that we created, that came from this Deutsch pin connector set and then just spools of wire. My brother created this wiring harness based off of the 4 wire colors that we have that match the 4-pin. So this will plug into that connector that's there right behind the passenger rear door. The rest of the harness is what will be feeding through the back of the bed, underneath the bed, following the wire harness to the 4-pin. All right, so our first order of business is going to be connecting this Deutsch connector harness that we created with this loose end to the 4-pin that we bought off of Amazon or wherever you buy yours. So we just need to match these wires to the 4-pin, and we've color coordinated them with the harness that we created, with the exception that the blue wire is going to be our reverse light wire, which the 4-pin does not have. It has brake, turn signals, and running lights. The way we're going to connect these two is we're going to use simple butt connectors with a crimping tool and then some shrink tube over the top so that it's waterproof and sealed as it sits underneath the bed and gets a lot of weather. So we know white is our ground, yellow is our left turn signal, and green is our right turn signal. And this brown wire that's here on the back, we're actually not even going to use that. And so we're going to tuck that one away and make sure it's not going to make any contact with others. All right, so with these two harnesses, what we're going to do is we're going to use some classic butt connectors and a crimping tool to get those two synced up together. And before we connect the wires, we're going to add some shrink tube to cover that butt connector, and then we'll heat gun over that so it really seals it from the weather, and then we'll do some electrical tape if need be. So let's go ahead and connect these 3 wires to our Deutsch connector kit to get that waterproofed and sealed up so that we can mount it underneath the vehicle. While this looks real gross, this doesn't look very tidy, so what we're going to do is we're just going to wrap this with some electrical tape, and then we're going to insert it so that it's hidden inside one of these plastic electrical wire covers. Got this plastic wire covering over it, what I like to do is I grab some zip ties and I basically just zip tie periodically throughout the plastic wire cover, and that way it can hold, it won't move, and it does keep that seal over the wires like you want it to. You just do that periodically down the rest of the cover, you know, maybe every foot or so, whatever you prefer, but definitely on the ends. All right, so now that we have this completely sealed up and our 4-pin that we bought from Amazon connected to the Deutsch connector wiring harness we created, we now have one continuous harness that will plug in plug into our Deutsch connector set, 4-pin, 7-pin T that we bought. And then this blue wire will be the lead that runs to our reverse lights. And so we'll prep for that. All right, so one thing I wanted to point out real quick is this is why I switched from this Amazon 7-pin to 4-pin connector to this Oracle Lighting 7-pin to 4-pin connector with the reverse light lead. That's the obvious thing, but I wanted to break it down just from a wiring perspective because this really made more sense when I actually did this first and realized I didn't really like the way I'd done it, which led me to going this route. So you can see here that we basically have a 7-pin to 4-pin, which works great. When you actually look at the 4-pin and what is giving you power, you really are only getting tail lights, left turn signals, right turn signals, and those are stops, and a ground wire. So what you're missing in here is a reverse function or a white light. You don't have a power, and you'd have to tap into the actual 7-pin here. But that's what Oracle Lighting did, is they tapped into it themselves and provided you these two leads for that reverse white light. So when we use this one, we no longer have to tap in ourselves and create a wire out of the 7-pin. We could just buy Oracle Lighting's kit and then use the power wire between one of these two to power to our white lights. So that's why I switched from just the classic Amazon 7-pin to 4-pin over to Oracle Lighting's, and this makes things way easier. All right, good morning, everybody. It is now the next day. We had to stop work yesterday due to family being here, and they have now left for the weekend, and so we're going to jump right back into getting the wiring hooked back up. And I did one thing off camera, which was I did a quick test to make sure my 4-pin was working, and the 4-pin connectors all the way to my Deutsch connector are indeed working, and they are. And so that's good. Now it just comes down to actually wiring everything, getting it put in, and zip tied underneath the Jeep. And so that's what we're doing today. All right, so here starting at the rear bumper, we've got our 7-pin to 4-pin T with this extra one that we've got to tie up still. But let's go ahead and do a quick dry run, make sure everything works. So we're just taking this, taking the 7-pin, lining them up, and just giving it a good push. Then when we go to hook everything up, once we've verified actually that everything is working, this will then plug into the 7-pin. So if you run your trailer, you still have that power that's connected there. And then the 4-pin that comes out of this T, we'll take our wiring harness that we created and we'll add that to the 4-pin and simply connect those two. Again, we'll add some dielectric grease to this fitting and this fitting once everything is verified that it's working, just so that way that keeps those connectors in good condition. And then here's our other end with our Deutsch connector waiting for us here at the bed. Let's go ahead and connect these two. Hear that click? That's how you know everything's waterproof. And it is connected. So now let's go ahead and test the lights. A simple way you can tell if the brake lights and the red light is working is by just hitting the lock button, which we can see both are unlocked. Yep, so the red light is working, haven't messed that part up. But what we really want to test is to see if those red lights turn into white lights when we put the Jeep in reverse and our two factory reverse lights do come on. So let's try that part. All right, so now that we have the wiring harness completed, we basically are going to be running that through the chassis and up to where our 4-pin Deutsch connector is. And for that process, all you need is your wiring harness, some zip ties, and I like to do it as clean as possible. So we're going to follow the wiring harnesses that are there if we can. And then if there's going to be a bulk spot, we'll kind of tie it up into a loop and just have it there. But I'm going to start from the Deutsch connector and work my way down, and we have plenty of extra room in our harness, just because you never want to be too short. You always would rather have a harness that'll get you where you need to go. Oh, and don't forget your cutters. I always forget my cutters. All right, kind of hard to see, but basically where that light is coming through, that's the back of the passenger cab, the front of the bed. So we're gonna thread our Deutsch connector up through there. I think looking back here at this is the passenger rear spring and coil right here. You can see we have some wiring harnesses that are being run. So I'm gonna snake our Deutsch connector up and through here, and we'll zip tie it to that, and then we'll have it push through right up here, which will then get us to that light spot between the passenger cab and the front of the bed. All right, so we'll basically follow this harness. I'm just gonna run this up and over. Should hang down, which it is. Give it plenty of slack because we got plenty of excess. All right, so we've got our wiring right over here, and what I'm doing is I'm going to run it just up through there, as you can see, and on my right, and then here on the outside, just beyond the fender well, you can see that's the upper shock mount. I have my hand actually on the other end of the connector. I'm going to pull it through just like so. Make sure it looks good on the other side, but then we'll be able to run this up. And then to get it all the way up, I just stuck a gripping tool. If you have one of those kits that allows you to fish wire through, but I connected this and I basically pulled it up. That's how I got it threaded up and through that area. Let's get it connected. All right, so just getting it connected here. Hear the click, that's good to go. So now that we got this connected, we're gonna go ahead and put this back down and hide that wire connection. And so that looks super clean in terms of the wiring is just hidden. It goes all the way behind that. You can kind of see it right there, but we'll work on cleaning that up. But that's pretty nice. It hides right behind the back of the Jeep. And then when we go to take this bed rack off, all you do is just pull up on that, disconnect them, and you're good to go. All right, so now that we've got the wiring harness plugged in and kind of semi-run, let's go through and zip tie everything and get it tight. And I'm starting from my Deutsch connector at that rear passenger door where the two connectors meet. I'm gonna start there and work my way backwards. And then any excess I have, I'm gonna go ahead and coil right there by the 7-pin and 4-pin connector. Well, folks, that brings us to a conclusion. I'm going to sit here and clean up this table. That's pretty boring to watch, but I wanted to say thank you for tuning in. This is an interesting video from an electrical standpoint. I am by no means an electrician, an expert at all. I was querying a lot of friends and my brother who is good at this stuff. So if you're not really familiar or sure on how to do these things, I'm saying this because you can do it too. I'm really thrilled with the result. I'm happy everything obviously works, but our wiring is absolutely cleaner. It looks way better, and it functions from the standpoint of we can remove the bed rack, unplug our Deutsch connector, and we're good to go, whereas before we would have had to cut into that harness. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have other ideas or would have done things differently or have any questions about it, please put those in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you, and I really appreciate you tuning in. Until the next time, we'll see ya.